Hello, everyone. Welcome to CraftQuest on Call. I'm Ryan Ireland from CraftQuest.io, and I'm happy, as always, to be joined by my friend and esteemed colleague, for whom I don't have any fancy names this week, Mr. Andrew Welch. Hello, Andrew. I hope you're not disappointed that I don't have any names for you.
I am a little disappointed, actually, Ryan. I'm wondering if you're actually doing the show prep like the true prepper that you are. You
know? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a prepper. So it's good to be back. We're in August. At least here in Texas, it's been a relatively mild summer, but it's still August. Always still feels like you want to move. You want to get out of Texas because it's just endlessly hot and humid. It's like 80 degrees is like our low at night. So
how is this different from any other season that you want to get out? I mean, it's just...
Well, in the winter, it's like that's the time when you want to be outside. There's no mosquitoes. Mosquitoes have been terrible because it's been so wet and rainy this year. But anyway, enough about Texas. What's going on?
Can I mention something real quick, Ryan?
Yeah, please do.
Now, far be it from me to put up a GoFundMe page or anything that, horrible, but we're in the middle of having our roof torn off our house and a whole new roof put in.
Yeah.
5 new automatic skylights put in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're doing that. We're replacing our entire whole
live
home.
Streams each month to the schedule. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, and we're also replacing our entire house AC system.
Oh, wow.
So the whole home AC system is getting replaced, and both of my kids have braces. So,
wow. All right. That sounds braces.
So,
we haven't gotten to braces yet.
I might be filing for bankruptcy soon. I haven't decided yet.
Is it a two-zone system for
3-zone?
3-zone. Do you really need AC though, where you're at?
In the summertime, it gets real hot and real humid. So
okay,
yeah, absolutely, we need AC in the summertime.
Yeah.
Actually, we moved into the house, and the house we moved into, one of the kids had allergies, and the other one had asthma or something like that. So they actually didn't have any kind of blown heating system or cooling system at all.
Oh,
and
wow.
we decided to try one summer or 1 year in the house before we just threw AC in it.
Yeah.
And sometime in the middle of the summer, I'm just like, oh yeah. Yeah, we're getting AC. It can get over 100 degrees and really humid, quite frequently over the summer here. Yeah.
I'm waiting.
So can we schedule CraftQuest pretty much every day? Because I got a lot of stuff I got to pay for here.
That's going to prevent me from replacing my AC. I think ours is so in Texas. The air conditioning units, they get worked pretty hard, and when we bought this house 2.5 years ago, the inspector said, well, the AC unit's about 10 years old, and that's kind of like pushing it in Texas because of how hard you have to work them. So I'm kind of bracing for at any moment this thing could go out. And the problem is that the house was built in 1962. We're kind of in the old northern, it's now central Austin, but it's the old northern suburbs, post-war suburbs. But I don't think it was originally built with AC because the bathrooms don't have any AC vents to blow cool air into them. And, and you can just kind of look to see it's kind of retrofit, and where they put the blower and everything it just makes it kind of loud in the house and everything. But anyway, but I feel you. It's one of the things that I worry about is this AC unit gonna die? But it's probably better it sounds like you're being proactive and just replacing it before the whole thing just dies.
Sort of. So our unit is about 14 years old now.
Oh, okay.
And it's had a couple issues, and we had them out here, and they're kind of just like, well, it's about the end of the age. If it was me, I would just get a new unit. And I'm just like, okay, I'm calculating ahead 15 years, and I'm like, all right, by the time we would actually need to replace it again, if we did it now, it's going to be someone else's problem, because I'm going to have sold this house. The kids are out. We're going to be somewhere else. So I'm like, all right, let's just do it. But Ryan, we have to stream every day, 8 hours a day.
Well, let's see if we can get
weeks,
some help.
Right?
Let's see if we can get some help with that, Andrew.
All right.
So a couple things I've been tweeting about is that if you're not a premium subscriber of CraftQuest and you would like to be, I want you to know that you can actually have a free trial. So everybody that signs up for a new account, you can get a 3-day trial, whether you sign up for monthly or annual. And you have 3 days to explore the entire catalog. You have full premium access. And then when your trial's up, you'll just start right in to a premium access account so you don't lose any access to all the content. So check that out if you haven't already. If you're already a premium subscriber, thank you. I spend almost my entire week working on both the internals, like the code for CraftQuest, as well as researching, writing, recording content to put up on the site. I publish every week. There's a new video coming out today, right after the live stream, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I wanted to share that, Andrew. And speaking of that, of working on code on the site, you have me. I don't want to say you have me because I made the choice myself, but I've been moving the site over to use the Vue build system that you came up with, and it's just about done. It's not launched yet. That's a little bit of a bigger launch because it's changing sort of the structure of the project. But that's been going pretty well, and it's nice to have, as I've been having to write some more JavaScript to do some things, for things that I've deprecated and have to redo. It's just nice to have a really clean build system all set up right in the project. So that's been nice. So if you haven't, we've done videos on Vue. There's one called Vue like feet or something like that. I forget what the name of the live stream is, but we have a Vue rhymes with feet. We have videos up on that if you want to check out what we're talking about. Vue's a build system. Is that also by Evan Yu? Did he also do Vue?
Yeah.
Man. Because today we're going to talk about Petite Vue, which is a small version of Vue. Kind of makes sense with the name. So Evan Yu also created this. It was a little bit of like sounded like it was kind of like a all-nighter side project he did on a whim and kind of carved out the reactivity part of Vue. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what it is, some good use cases in a little bit. But Andrew, so you've had a couple of software releases since we last talked. You and Ben Croker from putyourlightson.com came up with Craft Autocomplete, which we did talk about in the last live stream.
Yeah, we did.
And so you released version 1 of Craft Autocomplete. So what does this do if I install this plugin?
Well, hold on. So before we talk about me, I want to talk about you. So when you're working on rebuilding this whole site,
okay,
in Vue and everything else,
how
many times did you say something that your lovely daughter is not supposed to hear and mention my name in conjunction with it? You know what I mean?
There were a couple moments where because Vue is very opinionated and forward thinking. You have to use modern JavaScript modules in order to even import it. Or I guess you can get around it other ways, but it's really meant for the whole modern tool chain. But there was some stuff I was using, it wasn't set up to work. So I probably cussed you a couple times, but honestly, it was just a matter of just pushing through and figuring out how am I going to get this to work? Or do I even need this? One of the things was, so it's still, parts of it still run on Bootstrap. I've sort of scraped a lot of that away and using Tailwind, but it's not all done yet. And one of the things that it was using is Popper, which is a library this popover library that Bootstrap relies on. And it just wouldn't work. So I just ended up ditching it completely and just writing in vanilla JavaScript, where the one place I needed a little pop-up menu. I just wrote it in vanilla JavaScript. And so I've been making decisions like that. But I have...
Well, the reason I wanted to ask you about it is that I think it's something that as web developers, we face it all the time, whether it's with our own agency site, which, as the, what do they call it? The cobbler's shoes or whatever, always ends up getting neglected.
Children have no shoes or something. Yeah.
whatever. We're mixing metaphors. It might be mixed up with the emperor has no clothes. Who knows? Whatever it ends up
Okay.
being. My point, and also we have client sites that they need to be upgraded at some point, and everyone knows that it reaches this kind of Dr. Seuss level of code debt at some point,
Yep.
where you're just like, you know what? It'd be easier if we just knocked the whole thing down and started over. And so
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you are rebuilding your site using, because kind of you got an MVP up and you're now redoing it, quote unquote, right, or at least giving yourself a modern platform to build stuff on. And the approach that you're taking, where you're like, oh, well, I could spend a lot of time to get this super old, probably hasn't been updated in 5 years JavaScript library working.
Yeah.
Or maybe the platform just works without it now, or maybe there's something more modern. I think that's actually a really nice way to renovate your site, because you're renovating not just the infrastructure, but then you're not just taking like this old rotted stuff and bolting it back on as you're building it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the decisions I've had to make, and I had to make some others. Like I did have to import jQuery because there are some places that it requires jQuery because of the original code base. So, but that's something.
What's wrong with jQuery? You can still use jQuery.
Yeah, no, jQuery is fine. I'm just trying to get rid of having to rely on it at all.
If you don't need it, get rid of it. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was something where, all right, I'm just going to import it, because what I didn't want to end up doing is slowly digging myself like a deeper and deeper hole where that project actually never gets done. That the goal is the project gets done. And, that was the original goal when I created CraftQuest. I basically did it from concept to launch and generating revenue in about 3 months. And so obviously that required a ton of trade-offs. And I need to go back and look at the original version, because it was the design was basically the same, but the functionality was quite a bit different than it is now.
Well, far be it for me to interrupt your bragging, but this reminds me of, so I recently converted 2 of the craft demos over, right?
Yeah.
So I converted the Smoking Gear over to use Vite, and then I converted their Europa Museum over to use Webpack. And you might say, well, why didn't you just do Vite for both of them? Well, it ended up being that, similar to what you're talking about, the code base in the Europa project relied on a number of older projects that were all CommonJS or whatever.
Right.
And as you mentioned, Vite, one of its goals or one of its kind of maxims is it's trying to move the whole ecosystem forward, to remove this dependency on this old CommonJS format that was actually created just for Node, is where it was created. So we're not, and it wants to use the modern ES module syntax, which is what the standard is going forward for JavaScript modules.
Right.
And at some point in the conversion process, I was just like, you know what? I probably could hammer this together to use Vite, but this is a case where unless someone was paying me to actually do this conversion and they said it must run on Vite, it's a case where I would pick Webpack. And I want to note this because people often ask me, well, should I use Vite or should I use Webpack for this new project that I'm working on? And I think a really good case for using Webpack, first of all, there's nothing wrong with Webpack, right? It's not like it's suddenly obsolete. It's a fantastic technology. It's been out for forever. A case for using Webpack is when you have a older code base that you just need it to work and you cannot go through the process of upgrading all the stuff that's in it. Webpack is going to handle all the edge cases for you. Everything is going to work fantastic. If you are working on a new project or a project where you're cool with modernizing certain parts of the code base, then I would say use Vite. So I think that is an answer to a question that I have a lot of people asking me about, well, Webpack or Vite, Webpack or Vite. New projects or projects where you're up for modernizing the code base where needed, use Vite. Projects that you've got a whole bunch of legacy JavaScript code that is either yours or is third party that you rely on and you don't want to have to do anything with replacing, then I would use Webpack, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. Yep. Yeah.
And you are cool with modernizing everything, so you're Viteing everything up, right?
Apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. But it's been good.
It's actually not that bad.
No, it's actually been really good. And honestly, it's the when you're doing stuff like this, right? The you have to give yourself permission to take the time to do that type of work.
Yeah.
Because I'm not like, I'll launch this and there are some design changes. Because while I was in there, I just got fed up with some of the stuff. And so I did redesign some things. But 90% of what I've done, no one will see. And I think you commented that 100% of what I've done, I'll see and I'll know, what I've done. So I had to give myself permission to take
not just
the time
know,
to do it.
not just know. So it's going to give you a better base to build on. Yes,
Totally.
that's true.
Yeah.
But the point that I was trying to make when I mentioned that to you was more that doing this has forced you to grow and you to learn things. So while people may not see the change in the site, there's a change in you. You know what I mean?
What does Michael Jackson say?
The man in the mirror? Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, something. All
Why don't you play it so we can get demonetized?
All right. Did you want to? So autocomplete, you and Ben Croker worked on the plugin and it's been released. And this is a way of getting the IDE auto-completion for all of Craft's, before they do their update, but for all of Craft's code. And then also, what does it do with then actual like third-party plugins?
Yeah, so the change that Brandon made it so that anything craft dot will autocomplete.
Right.
The downside is that it does not autocomplete stuff that comes from a plugin. So then if you had craft.blitz, you're not going to get that autocomplete. And there are some other edge cases where it doesn't as well. And so that's what the plugin does, is it kind of fills everything. Now we're hopeful that at some point this might be rolled into core in terms of what we did. But if not, it's no big deal. All you have to do is require the package. You don't have to install anything. And you're just automatically going to get the autocomplete in PHP Storm. And it's kind of wonderful. You just go to github.com, nystudio107, craft dash autocomplete.
Sorry, 1 second.
And you're showing your screen. That's okay. Just want to make sure, nothing weird happens here. So I think it's really nice. And it's not going to help pay for my kids' braces or anything. It's all free and open source. And it was a great collaborating with Ben. He's a really smart guy and he's great to work with. And it was a fun project to do. So we banged it out, and there may be further improvements to it. We've also got Oliver Stark from Fort Rabbit on board, is going to be helping us out with adding some unit testing to the project. So it's been a lot of fun. I get to work with smart people, and what more could you want? Work with smart people, create something that helps the community and ecosystem. These are all good things. It's not going to pay for my roof, but what are you going to do?
All right, let me fix there we are. Okay. What else was on the list? Oh, so you also, Andrew, released SEOmatic. I know you don't like to pimp your stuff here too much, but SEOmatic 3.4 is out, and it has some enhancements for how to manage data. I'm about to put in that's what I was trying to do when I blew up the screen there for a second. In the chat, I put in a link to your Twitter announcement.
Oh, okay.
So check that out.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, the major change is just to the SEO settings field, which is the most client-facing part of the whole thing. A lot of times, clients may not even have access to some of the other settings that are in there. And it fixes something that has been a long-standing issue with the UX, from my point of view, in that it should be significantly more clear that the settings field allows you to override the default SEO settings. So it was a ton of work refactoring everything, but I think it's much, much nicer now.
Excellent. And also .all, they released the full schedule. It's still on. I know that the Delta variant of COVID is blasting through the world right now. So I'm sure it's a little dicey for .all, but as far as I know, Europe is a bit better off than Texas is. So it sounds like things are going as planned for about 5-6 weeks from now in Amsterdam. They got the schedule released, so you can check that out if you're interested, as well as 2 workshops. Our friend Ben Croker is doing a workshop on optimizing Craft for performance. So
Oh my goodness, Henri is there. He's doing the closing keynote. That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. He was in he was in Montreal too, right? I think.
Montreal, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah.
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 Excellent. So check that out. So you want to jump into our questions, Andrew?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. First one is, hang on, I gotta accept cookies. Shake my fist at Europe every time I have to do that. All right.
How dare they care about privacy?
I mean, all they did is make everybody click a button.
I know that is the annoying part. Like, I actually agree with you. I agree with their intention and what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, it ends up being this sort of performative. Everybody just auto clicks on whatever, you know.
Right. All right. So here's a thing, and another a friend of ours, Lindsay, replied here. But is there a way to restore a deleted user? So if anyone has deleted a user before, they know that it pops up this little modal that says, basically, are you sure? And if you are, what do you want to do with this user's data if they have any data? So you can assign it to someone else, or you can just delete it along with the user. So it sounds like that the content wasn't assigned to someone else before deletion, so all of the pages are gone.
Yep.
Lindsay chimed in and said, is this Craft 3? Because I know he's immediately thinking about soft deletes, right? Because there's a chance that it's still there and in the database. So I thought we would talk about kind of when were soft deletes introduced? Sometime, what, 3.2, 3.4? I don't remember. But
3.1.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it was that long ago. So talk about kind of soft deletes and how you could potentially save yourself, but likely you probably just be more careful about who is allowed to delete users, and then what actually happens when you delete them. But what is soft deleting, Andrew? What does Lindsay mean in his comment on that question?
So it's something that there's a package for Yi called soft delete. And what it does is when something is deleted, instead of actually being physically deleted from the database, it is marked as being deleted. And it won't appear in any searches. It'll be as if it's deleted, but it's still there, right? So it's still like kind of hanging around. And then there's this garbage collection task that it's kind of involved, but there's a chance that the stuff that is soft deleted will actually get physically deleted, after some time frame. And you can set, how long that should be and all that kind of good stuff. But essentially that's what it is. So it's a way of emulating the Mac's trash can or the Windows recycle bin or whatever you want to call it, where you drag something in there and it looks like it's deleted, but if you want to get it back, you can open it back up and you can pull it out. And as long as you haven't done empty trash, it's going to be there. And it's very similar to this. And there is a very good chance that they're running Craft 3.1 or later. And if they are, they should be able to undelete this user and restore everything, I would assume. I've never done it, but I am pretty sure that it'll work.
And I don't remember what the default garbage collection is on soft deletes. I would have to look up again in the docs. But there is a default time that when it passes, right? Then it'll just garbage collect everything. All right. Good. So we got some info about soft deletes. So if you haven't read up on soft deletes, it's probably a good thing to know about in case you are ever in this situation. All right. Next question, Andrew. And this is more of a general approach question. We don't have to answer it in terms of actual implementation details here. But
Thank
somebody
God.
wants to upload multiple assets using a front end form. And I actually started working on some material for uploading files, assets from the front end via GraphQL, via mutations.
Yep.
And it's actually there's actually a fair amount to it. It's not that straightforward, but let's put that aside. But if you were asked to do this, what would be put on your technical architect hat, you're just thinking about an approach to this problem. How would you first approach uploading assets, maybe from the easiest implementation to something more difficult? What would be going through your head here?
So part of it would depend on what was being uploaded and what the requirements of that are. Mm-hmm. And the reason is that if you're dealing with relatively small files, you can do, it's not that difficult to just do a front end form that has a a file attachment, and as long as you set the type of the form properly, this is all from memory, so it's probably not entirely correct, but I remember it has to be a multi-page form, something like that.
Multi-part. Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and a couple other minor things, and then you can just hit the craft controllers, and it should work. It should just work in terms of the uploading. There, if you get into much larger files, you can end up with issues of the page timing out and the limits of how long a PHP process can run,
Right.
and all that kind of fun stuff. And when you start getting into that level of robustness, there are packages. I know from Fred made something from Superbig. He made like a big file upload plugin or something like that.
Okay.
I would probably reach for that, primarily because even if you don't think that users are going to be uploading large files, like they very well may be anyway, but part of it depends on the requirements. I guess that's kind of a vague answer, but that's how I would approach it.
I was actually thinking, does Formy have like front end code for file uploading? I wonder if they have like some. I actually don't know.
I would imagine that all of the well, I don't know about front end. I don't know if on the front end part that they have that or not.
Okay.
I feel like, and I know this is kind of a cop out, but I think it is the correct answer, that in order to really answer it correctly, I would kind of need to know more about what they want. Because if it is, like, let's say it is just part of a large form submission, then maybe it is time to look at a form plugin and say, hey, this would really help you out to do this. The real benefit of these form plugins is that somebody else, like a content author, can be changing the forms.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to be just something that is a fixed form, like a contact form, or something is just never going to change, you're not getting a huge benefit by using these various plugins. I mean, you are getting a little bit, but you could just implement it on your own as well. So
Yep.
I don't know.
Okay.
I know it's a lame answer, but I kind of feel like I would need
to
know more about the requirements.
This is one of those things where, like, are you uploading a like 10 kilobyte text file, plain text file, or
Yep.
are you asking them to upload like 120 megabytes of XYZ like zip file or whatever it is, or CSVs, like huge CSVs or something. So like this is one of those things where like it could be, this, like, speaking of being put on a consultant hat, like you could say, well, this could take me 1 hour or it could take me 100 hours.
Yeah.
It really depends on
Right.
like, what are we building here?
Right. And also just that there might be a larger benefit from using a form plugin, for instance, depending on what they're trying to do. Right. So if they were having a whole, in the context of the project, if they were having a whole lot of forms and marketing need to change those forms on a regular basis, then for sure we're going to evaluate the different forms plugins and say, which one will make the most sense? Does it have stuff that will speed our development in terms of just handling the uploaded files for us and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, exactly. All right, next question.
And I'm always, just to finish up, I'm always someone that I would much rather leverage an existing solution that is supported by somebody, whether it's an open source community or a paid plugin. I would much rather leverage something like that rather than reinvent the wheel every time for a website.
Exactly. So this person says, I have a website that has membership where everybody can register and verify via email to become a member. But some members are still signing in even though they are not verified and the page is just refreshing. I'd like to ask if there's a way that I can set up redirection when unverified members sign in. So the first thing I thought was, I didn't realize that unverified members could sign in by default, but I guess they can.
I didn't know that either.
However,
maybe is there a setting? I'll look it up. You talk.
Yeah. So you could do a couple things like, so there's a couple things you can do. The first thing is, if you just want to like tackle this quickly, I would, when they log in, just check for their status, and then you can do something based on that. And so and you can just do like current user dot status, and it should return something like active. You can see the status is right here: suspended, pending, locked. I don't know if they'll actually be able to log in if they're locked or even suspended. But pending is the one you're looking for, because pending is the one where they're not yet email isn't yet verified, as far as I know, if I remember correctly. But I didn't realize that you could log in if you're not verified. But maybe you can. So
I am searching for a setting for this to see, because
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that either. How can you? That doesn't make sense to me. Because that's the whole point of verifying, is that you're not supposed to be able to log in until you have verified.
verified that your email is that you own your email address. So
Yeah.
So there might be something else going on there. Like, I don't know what their sign up and login routine is. Maybe they've customized it somehow, or they're bypassing something in Craft.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do need to check for a status, you can do it via these statuses. And you can also query for users as well based on the statuses. Did you find anything?
I am searching and I'm not finding anything immediately.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I guess let's just assume that it operates the way that you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would do exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
All right.
Not seeing it. So I guess the only thing that would make sense is if someone has signed up or been signed up by somebody else, they haven't verified their email, but then they also just try to log in with their existing email address and password or whatever they were given. I guess that would work. I wouldn't think that it would. I would think that it would error.
Yeah, I would think it would too. Or you don't have what was it? Whatever the generic access message is, when you don't have permission to access it. So
yeah, that's the way every other form I've ever used anywhere.
Yeah.
They'll tell you can't log in until you have verified. Oh, well, that's not true. That's not true. There are some services I've signed up for where they will allow you to log in, but they won't allow you to do certain things until your email has been verified. So maybe
Right.
Craft is doing this to allow for that flexibility. I don't know.
yeah. Now I kind of want to try it. All right. Well, because I've done it a lot for people where I'll create a user in the system. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I'm actually going to try this.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
So while you're doing this, Joe was commenting on the uploading, and he's saying he did it recently. He went the route of letting the user select multiple files, but uploaded each one separately via Ajax. That
Okay.
makes sense. You can show per file progress and all that kind of stuff. You'll need some kind of front end, either library or custom code to show this, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's commenting on this, the activation thing. He said, yeah, the user isn't activated before verification. That's what I thought.
That's what I thought so
But-
too.
But maybe that's not the case for the reason I mentioned, where, I mean, some services I know that you can log in, but there are just certain parts of the system you can't access until you have verified your email address. So maybe they're doing that to allow for this functionality. I don't know.
Yeah, it won't work for me in this version
All right.
on CraftQuest because of how I have it set up. So
Research it offline, and
I'll research it, and
you
then
know,
we'll figure it out. All right, Andrew. Let's talk about something here called Petite Vue. Are you ready?
nice. I am ready.
All
I was
right.
born ready.
So, let's kind of frame this for everyone because it's new. I think it was released. What was it, like June, end of June?
Yeah, about 2 months ago, something like that. Yeah.
So Andrew, what is Petite Vue? Tell the masses.
So petite in French means little, and this kind of carries on the author Evan Hughes, he's the one who also wrote Vue.js and also wrote Vite. His tradition of using French words for his naming, and essentially it's a small version of Vue, right? That makes sense. And I think it's primarily the type of thing where he was looking around and he saw that Alpine JS was getting kind of popular. And Alpine JS actually uses Vue's reactivity model, right? So it's actually using part of Vue to do its thing. And I think Evan was probably sitting around. He's like, I didn't realize that there was a need for something that would work well with back-end rendered pages. So server rendered pages like coming from Laravel, like coming from Craft CMS, Statamic, all that kind of stuff. And I think he said, well, you know what? Why don't I just make something that is kind of like Vue, but it is geared specifically towards people that need this kind of functionality. In other words, if you're using a server rendered framework and you want JavaScript just to handle some of the logic, sprinkle a little reactivity throughout the page, something that's very typical that we run into developing craft sites all the time, where Twig is great for rendering stuff server side, but then you often need something client side to add the reactivity and interactivity and all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the reasons why he decided to create it was that by creating Petite Vue, you can use the exact same syntax that you would use in full-blown Vue.js that you use in Petite Vue. So it's almost like Alpine, but get rid of all the custom Alpine syntax. And instead of that, you're using the exact same stuff that you would use if you were using Vue.js. And this has two obvious advantages. So what do you think the two advantages might be of that part of it?
I would say one of them is that if you don't know Vue, but you start using Petite Vue, you can take the knowledge that you've gained from using Petite Vue and carry that up into Vue. Then you'll be familiar, or at least comfortable. There's some things that are different, but you'll be at least comfortable.
And it works both ways, right? So if you already know Vue, then by what's the word I'm looking for? By transition, there's some word, I don't know what it is. But if you already know Vue, you already know Petite Vue, right? So it's Petite Vue is a subset of Vue. So you don't have things like single file components, right? But the other neat thing is you also don't have a build step, right? So you can just include this via CDN and away you go. You don't need a Webpack, you don't need a bundler, you don't need any of that kind of stuff. The other major advantage of this is that if you've got a code base that initially you think it needs just a little bit of stuff sprinkled in it, so you start using Petite Vue because you're comfortable with it and all that kind of stuff, and then the scope changes. I'm sure no one has ever had this happen to us, right? Where the PM or the client, it never happens. But where the scope changes, it creeps in there, Then you have a path to transition it to full-blown Vue.js. Whether that means just using full-blown Vue, or whether that means you're now building an SPA or whatever. And it kind of gives that code a little bit more life, because you're going to be able to then bring it up and promote it to Vue, so to speak. Right? So that would be the reason, I think, for this existing. I think Evan was just like, hey, this Alpine thing is kind of cool. It's using Vue already. Why don't I make something that is specifically for the same people that Alpine is for, but it's going to use a subset of Vue.js, so that either if you don't know Vue already, you're going to learn it, which is great because Vue is a huge ecosystem out there. Or if you do know Vue already, then that knowledge is going to translate and you're going to be able to work with this nice little lightweight library, and you're going to feel comfortable because you have domain knowledge of using it. So that's kind of what it is. And it is specifically is made for sprinkling a little bit of interaction into existing HTML pages that are server rendered, which is exactly what Craft CMS is. That's exactly what it is.
And it's small. I believe it's 5.8 kilobytes. So it's not big, and it's easy to drop in. And in fact, I moved something from Alpine to Petite Vue just to see, and it shouldn't be surprising like how much I didn't have to change. I mean, like the directives and stuff I had to change, and put in vscope. There's some things that are particular to Vue and Petite Vue, but otherwise like the general approach is essentially the same.
And so that's another interesting thing, is if you know Alpine already, the transition to Petite Vue is not going to be a big deal either.
Nope.
And then again, you get the upside of, well, I'm learning something that is more of a industry standard in that it will then, the same knowledge will then apply to a large Vue project, that type of thing.
Exactly, because we want to make sure we're using tools and technologies that allow us to expand not only our knowledge, but into other areas and carry that knowledge forward. We shouldn't be creating knowledge dead ends as much as possible.
I do, man. I mean, the only time I want to go to a boutique is when I need to get something for my wife for her birthday. You know what I mean? Like, the more boutique the technology, the more I'm like, do I really, the few brain cells I have left, do I really want to spend it on this thing that I'm only going to use in this really, really narrow place?
Yep.
And I try to avoid things like that if I possibly can. So for instance, I love the fact that CraftCMS has embraced GraphQL.
Yeah.
And I'm less sanguine about using the Element API, for instance, because it's
Right.
literally the only place you're going to use this Element API thing is in CraftCMS,
And GraphQL is universal. And there's so much happening in GraphQL. I talked to someone, a friend of mine who is working on server generated UIs via GraphQL, like all sorts of cool stuff out there. You look that up. It's a whole subset of GraphQL now. So lots of cool stuff happening.
Yeah.
All right.
So should we get into some examples?
Let's
or
get
what?
into some examples. Did you share your desktop?
I am clicking on the button.
All right.
And making sure I share the right one. There we go.
Okay, I see it.
Should be sharing.
Okay. Let me see if it's there. There we are. Excellent. All right, Andrew. So walk us through Andrew, take the wheel here. Go for it.
All right. I like to think of it as a ship, Ryan, so I'm gonna take the rudder. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you take the rudder there.
So this is just the Petite Vue repository that's up on GitHub, and it's worth taking a look through. It is only 5.8 kilobytes, and they talk about a bunch of usage stuff. We're going to go through this in some of the examples that I did. I'm just going to scroll down just to show you. It talks about the similarities and anywhere where it is different from Vue. So it shows this is everything that's Vue compatible, the few things that are not supported, et cetera, et cetera. And then it has a nice little comparison to standard Vue. Again, these are things that I just think you might want to read later. And I'm just making you aware that they're here. And then this is a comparison with Alpine that they have here, right? So let's get into a couple of examples. And I want to make it clear that the first couple of examples that I'm going to show are literally ripped from the Petite Vue README file, right? So that's literally what it is. So here's our first example. And this is a perfect example of how simple it is. So the first thing I'm just going to show you is we have this verbatim tag here. And all this means is it's telling Twig, everything in here, don't touch it. And the reason we're doing that is Vue and Petite Vue, they both use the double mustache for directives. And that's also what Twig uses. So we have to tell it, hey, everything that's in here, Twig, don't touch it. Just leave it exactly the way it is. So that's what I've done here. And this is an example of how this works. So it's as simple as creating a script tag and then pointing to the CDN version of Petite Vue. And this is just telling it to defer the execution of the script, just like just as normal. And init is just telling Petite Vue to automatically look for anything that you have marked on your in HTML that should be reactive. And we'll show how that works. So this div, you see where we have vscope?
Yeah, so
this
that's
is very
new.
similar. Yeah, this is new, and this is analogous to an Alpine, I believe it's X state. And all we're doing is we're declaring everything that is in here is now reactive. It's owned by Vue, and we can put our data in here. So this is where we're assigning count to be 0. So count is a variable. We're setting it to 0, and this is where we can just do the double mustache to output count, right? And so you can see here, here's our code, and this is where it's outputting the 0, which is count right here. And then we've got a button, and @click is just v on click. Yep. So it's an event handler. So anytime anyone clicks on this button, do execute this JavaScript code, and it's count ++. So it should be pretty obvious what's going to happen. I click on this, it makes it bigger. That's all it does. But it's kind of nice if you look at it. Like, it's really easy to read, and we're not plumbing the DOM looking for this, that, or the other thing with jQuery. Everything is all laid out, and it's state driven, and it's kind of nice, right?
I like it.
Let's move ahead to. I'm going to skip ahead actually to example 3, which is also ripped from the docs in here. And again, everything the same. Type equals module. A little bit different though. So instead of just importing it in script tags like we did here, where we're just saying pull this script in, we're using an import, an ES module import, and we're saying import the create app function from this script. And down here is where we're doing create app, and we're returning counter, which is just a function, right? So this is just a function that's up here. And the difference between this counter and the one we're looking at before is this is using something called a template. So this lets you create multiple instances of the same thing using, we've got just this code is just written once, but everything that is in this template can be replicated as many times as you want. So right down here, we've got our vscope, which is telling Vue that, hey, or Petite Vue, sorry, hey, this is reactive, I'm sorry. So Ben is correcting me. He's saying that vscope is analogous to xdata in Alpine.js, not xstate.
Yep.
Anyway, so we've got vscope here. And what we're saying is counter, pass in the initial count of 1, and then execute this, and then here's our component that actually renders it, right? So we can see here that's listed twice because we got another div here, but this time we're setting the initial count variable we're setting it to 2 initially.
Yeah.
So when we reload this page initially, it's going to have, this thing is going to have the count of 1, this is going to have the count of 2. The button is still working the same, right? It's just an @click. And so but when we click, it increments just this one, and this, it increments just this one. And what this is showing is that you can reuse the same component with different initial data. So if you need the same thing, but replicated a bunch of places on the page. Does that make sense?
And 2 instances as well, right? So they're acting independently.
Yes.
And they're bound independently.
Exactly.
And also, one thing I want to note here is a good concept that people can learn and discover in Petite Vue is the concept of props as well, which you're using here.
Yes.
You're basically just using it as a way of passing data into this function here. But
right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Exactly. And then I've got one more. This is a silly contrived example that I made. And I've got a more interesting example later on, but this emulates kind of like basic stuff that you're going to want to do a lot of the time. So here we're just using the script tag, and then here's our vscope, again, analogous to xdata, as Ben mentioned. And we're saying set the hidden variable to 0, or the hidden property to 0 initially. And then we got this little button here that says do some magic, and it says on click, hidden equals the opposite of hidden. So bang is not hidden. So if it was hidden, it no longer will be. This is analogous to what a hamburger menu might be, right? So you click it, it shows, you click it again.
So you're toggling, basically. You set up a toggle type of behavior. Yeah.
That's it, right.
So and I'm surprised there's not confetti falling on this, but go ahead.
Yeah. There should be, damn, I should have put confetti.
I'm surprised you didn't import confetti.js and just let her rip.
I really should have. It's a big failing. You can do anyway, this is I'm not doing it live. I got another example that I want to show, and I don't want to run out of time because I think the other example is more interesting.
All right.
But this is the vif directive. So this is saying if hidden, it will show it, and otherwise it won't show it, right? So if this variable is set, it'll show it, and if not, it won't, right? So that's all. All it is. Really simple. Very simple state, but it's kind of nice to see how easy it is to do something like this with very little JavaScript, vscope just defines where the component is going to be, and then we've got our event handler, we've got a little bit of data, and this little handler that changes the data based on what the user did, and then this div that is shown or not shown based on that data, right? Okay.
All right.
So those are trivial examples. Those are things that most of them you could just copy and paste from the docs and you could check them out. I just think it was still useful to show them to just get a light introduction to it. So now I want to show you the other one that I came up with.
All right.
And hopefully this one will be a little bit more interesting. So a number of years ago, and in actual programmer years, I think this is like a couple of lifetimes or something.
800
It's 3
maybe?
years. Yeah, it's forever. I wrote this article in 2018 on using Vue.js and GraphQL to make practical magic. So what I did was I picked out 2 very common things that we might like to be doing on the front end. And one of them is an autocomplete search. And so
man,
I showed how to
almost did this. This is so funny. All right, I'm glad you did this. Awesome.
So I did the autocomplete search. And for those of you who don't know, like Ryan and I, we do collaborate and plan this, but a lot of times I don't tell him what I did because I want to surprise him. So he actually, that's genuine reaction that he had there. So this is an autocomplete search. I also did a contact form submission, but I didn't do that for this example. So this is an autocomplete search. And I think there's a screenshot of what this is going to look like. And I implemented this back in 2018.
It's on CraftQuest right now, the old version of this. Is that using
sort
the
of
plugin or not?
Yeah, no, it's slightly different, but it's conceptually similar. But this is what it was going to look like, where you just type something in the search field and it will look through an entry and it will find autocomplete searches based on that thing, right? So this is what the demo looked like back then. And it was actually using, what did he call it? The GraphQL plugin that Mark Hewitt wrote, because this was actually before Craft even came out with. Yeah, GraphQL is it? Thank you. So this is what it does. So this is a very common thing, right? It's so common that Ryan has it on his site. I have it on my site. Everyone has an autocomplete search where you type something, it searches for results, and then you can pick the results from it. And I said to myself, this is a perfect thing to try because it's a common use case. And then also, if we're saying that Petite Vue is a subset of Vue, it should be pretty easy to take what I had here and convert it over into Petite Vue, right? That's the idea, right?
It should be. How late were you up last night?
It was actually pretty easy. It was surprisingly easy. What took more time than anything else was a couple of syntactical differences between GraphQL and the now implemented GraphQL that is in Craft CMS. And then just a couple other minor things, but it honestly mostly just worked, which is pretty amazing. I think it's pretty amazing. So I'm just going to show you. So here's the old article. We'll link to this old article. Here is how we created a new Vue instance. And this is kind of what is doing the bulk of the work. There are a couple of other helper functions that are in here, but this is all in the article. We'll show you that. Now let's take a look at what it looks like in Petite Vue.
All right.
So first, I'm just going to go to the page here. So here's our little search component, and I did everything the same here. I'm importing Bootstrap just for the UX. So everything is analogous to what I did in that article, 3.5 years ago or whatever it was. So I can just type something and there it goes. It just found them in the back end. Now this is implemented in Petite Vue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the preamble stuff. So this is the verbatim. This is where our stuff starts. All the stuff up here is just nonsense stuff like,
setting
what channel are we searching? What is our query that we're passing in? All that kind of stuff. And then I've got a helper function to create the request to the GraphQL API in the backend. This was all verbatim cut and paste from the article. Like I did absolutely nothing to this. Same with this execute query, which tells it just to run a query. Here's where we get to our actual component.
So now you're importing.
So we just
create app. Okay.
Yep. Import create app. And what you can see here is whereas here we had an explicit data : here's our data. Here, we just return this in an object. So we're returning search API is this. And this is directly analogous to what we did here. There's just no data prefix to this thing. It's just all returned in there. So here's our data, right? And then here's our methods. So we don't do anything different to make a method versus data, except that methods are functions, right?
Yep.
So that's all this is. This is a function. This is where we perform the search. And if you'll notice, I mean, it's the same damn thing, right? It really is. It's the same damn thing in terms of how it works. And then we do a dot mount, and then away we go. And here is the HTML code where we have our wrapper vscope that says Vue, hey, you own this stuff. All of this code was a literal copy and paste from the other article that I had. And everything just works. So, I mean, if we go over here, so let's see what else we have in our article. So maybe there's something on Ryan. Scandalous information about, there's a blog article, scandalous information about Ryan. Let's see what scandal information. Scandal involving man and goat. What? Hold on a second. Goat. Okay. Goat cheese sweatshop busted. Okay, so apparently Ryan was involved in some kind of a goat cheese sweatshop, something or other.
It sounds like you've been hitting that liquor I sent you.
Which liquor that you did not send me is kind of what you're saying, you know? But here, so I think this is a really cool example. And the reason I think it's a really cool example is I took a Vue component that I wrote 3.5 years ago, before Vue, Petite Vue was even a twinkle in Evan's eye. Mm-hmm. And I changed very little. Like literally, I was copying and pasting code, and it was really just deleting stuff. Like no longer is there a methods declaration, and no longer is there a data declaration. This is all just returned in the object coming back from
it's all kind of flattened
app.
down. Yep.
It's all just flattened together, but the code is the same, man. It's the same code going back and forth. So this is a really cool example of, it's going to be so easy to go back and forth between Vue and non-Vue if you want to. I think this is a really neat example of how you can do it. And I can give you all the code if you want to put it in a pen or do something with it.
Put this in a pen, and I have some pens as well. But this is cool. I like this. We should definitely throw this in a pen. It should be able to stand on its own. Ben in the chat asked, should this setup code live in the template, or is there a better place for it? And then he says, I suppose it is nice to be able to mix Twig code in as well.
It doesn't matter. So if he's talking about this stuff, like these helper things, if I was actually writing this, probably these would be in a separate JavaScript file.
Right.
And down here where I do import, I would just import the function, right?
Yep.
So instead of declaring this as a const configure API or const execute query, I would probably have it in a separate JavaScript file, and I would say import execute query from, my custom JavaScript, whatever. You know what I mean?
But you can also, but like for the smallest of implementations, you can drop it right in the Twig template and just have it have it work there.
I mean, you can do however you want. You know, I mean, this was done for example purposes where I didn't want to have separate files everywhere.
Yep.
But literally, if I was doing it the way that you're talking about, I would take all of this stuff and I would cut it out, right? And then I would have something like I was saying, import execute query from, and then whatever my source file was. Yeah.
Yep.
And then that would be it. And then all I would have in my actual template would be this stuff.
Yep.
And that's it,
That's cool.
And
that's a really good example of taking some old code and bringing it into this new tool. I like that a lot. We'll throw that in a pen, and it'll be linked along with this video for everyone. So Andrew, I've also been working on some Petite Vue stuff.
Nice.
And so let me bring up my desktop. So on CraftQuest, I have this idea where you can hover over a little like in progress icon and then mark a video as played like this. And so I was actually using Alpine.js for this, was what I was using. And so this in this pen is a very simple example. The data doesn't persist here. But I was able to really easily get that going. Let me just bring up. There we are. So this is just on a local version of the site, but I was able to replace my Alpine JS implementation of this using Petite Vue with like, it was literally changing, as Ben said, like X data to vscope, and just restructuring a couple things. But the general approach was exactly the same. And then just Marcus played, and then that basically calls a custom controller I have, and so that data is saved into the database, and that video is played. So that's like a real world example of how you can move older stuff over into Petite Vue if you want to, or just small interactions like this. You can set up with Petite Vue. So speaking of this, Andrew, so after the live stream is over, I'm going to carve out our Petite Vue lesson here. And I also have a separate lesson video I created that's going to launch after the live stream as well, that has additional examples. I have 3 other examples. So altogether, at the end of this live stream, you're going to have 6 Petite Vue examples that you can learn from. So check that out. It'll be up for premium members. Both this carved out video and my new lesson will be up for premium members on the live stream. So check that out.
And
so
Ben
Andrew,
Croker is saying, very cool to see that Petite Vue can be used as a drop-in replacement for Vue. In this case, at least, he says. And yeah, I mean, I was surprised. I was honestly surprised at how few changes I needed to make to have this work. And I think this is a very common case of the type of thing that people are using Vue or other frameworks for is something like this. And it was enheartening that it was this easy to move from one to the other.
Right. And then you're learning a tool, or a version of a tool and you can carry that knowledge into normal Vue work if you work on that type of stuff. So Andrew,
so that would be the main. Go ahead. I
was going to say, so we talked about Alpine JS and Petite Vue. Is there a time to use one or the other? How would you decide that, or is it really just what your preference is? I know you like to use Vue a lot. We've worked on a Vue project together. How would you make the decision if you used Alpine or Vue? Petite Vue, sorry.
So I would say that I like to use things that are standards. And one of the reasons why I like to use things that are standards are I like that the knowledge or the time that I'm spending investing in learning the thing is going to translate to a wide variety of projects, you know? Mm-hmm. And so that is kind of really where I would approach it from, that one of the biggest benefits, as we discussed early on, about using something like Petite Vue is that you're learning something that opens up a larger world to you. If you're learning Alpine and that's it. Mm-hmm. You're not going any further. Now, that doesn't mean that Alpine isn't the right choice. So let's discuss some of the pros and cons of these things. They both do essentially the same thing, right? One of the biggest pluses I would say for Alpine is that the author, Caleb Porzio, has a vested interest in Alpine working because he uses it on the projects that he creates. He is writing stuff in Laravel very frequently, and he needs something on the front end to do that kind of interaction. And the Laravel community has adopted Alpine in a decent regard. And there are a number of people from Craft and Statamic and other server-rendered technologies that also have started adopting Alpine. But that, I think, would be the biggest benefit of using Alpine, is that the author has a vested interest in this thing. And I think that may not be the case with Petite Vue and Evan Yu, because I think he is very invested in the JavaScript world, where it's JavaScript on the front end, it's JavaScript on the back end. And I think Petite Vue was something that was sort of a proof of concept kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the future holds for it. Like if I were evaluating these things in a vacuum, I would 100% gravitate towards Petite Vue, because I like that the knowledge I already have translates. I like that there's a large code base that I can draw upon that largely translates. You know, if I Google for something, I will probably find a Vue component that does what I want, and I can adapt that to Petite Vue pretty easily. Mm-hmm. Whereas that's not really the case with Alpine. It may get there. But the problem is we're not operating in a vacuum. And I really like it when the author of something dog foods the thing that they're working on. Like, I know Evan Yu uses Vite all the time, and I think that that's fantastic. I don't know how often Evan Yu is going to use Petite Vue, So I think it's early days to know where that's going to go. I'm hoping that some people that get involved with Petite Vue are people that are deeply involved with doing this kind of thing, and would then kind of take up the mantle of maintaining it and that type of thing.
Yeah, there was a declaration he made in the README for Petite Vue in the GitHub project saying that this is basically how I think it's going to be right now, and I'm likely not going to like merge in pull requests for new features. Like he already established this being like this is a very limited scope project, and so
Yes.
like you might run into something where like Petite Vue is you'll get a certain point and it's like it's not going to work with what you need. I mean, you can even already see it in some pull requests that are in there. So that's something to keep in mind.
But that's a feature, not a bug, right? So
Right.
they want to keep this thing and the scope of this thing small. And then you do have an upgrade path if you need something more involved, right? So that's when you go to full on Vue. So from that aspect, I think I'm going to reach for Petite Vue as opposed to Alpine, because I already know Vue and the knowledge translates, the ecosystem translates, and I'm just going to kind of hope that someone is going to continue to maintain and develop this library.
Yep.
I think that Alpine has a much larger head start in this community, and I think that it is more likely to be very maintained and evolving and all that kind of good stuff. But I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on what you need. For me, I think Petite Vue is probably what I'm going to do. For simple sites, I'm just going to slap it in there. I'm going to use it. I already know Vue. And then if something more needs to be done, I just change the library that I import, and away we go.
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, this is a good gentle introduction, I think, to Petite Vue. Check out the lesson on CraftQuest on Petite Vue as well, and with these things together, and then the code pens that I'll link to as well, so you can see all of the real basic working examples of the Petite Vue code.
I might even write an article on Petite Vue just to show the old article and then the new code. So if I do that, great. If not, we'll have a code pen that you can just link to.
Yeah, great. All right, Andrew, this is a good show. Thanks for joining me and for hanging out. And I'll see you again in a month, I think. Right? You're not going to be around for the next one, I think.
I don't think so. I think I'm going to be on vacation. But when you get the invoice for the work for this thing, don't be surprised. It's a little over 1,000 hours. It's a little bit of a coincidence that it just covers the deck work and the braces and also the new AC unit. But I just want to brace you for that. So
okay. Well, I'm going to start a new thing called Petite Invoice, where the invoices that come are only allowed to be small. All right, Andrew. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you on the next CraftQuest on Call. Take care.
Bye-bye.